Outside an underwater cave off the California coast, two divers unfurled a tough, wiry net. A few moments later, a third diver emerged from the cave. Before he knew what was going on, he was deliberately enmeshed in the net. He wasn't released from it till he was dead. I didn't know the divers, and nobody knew what had happened. But I was on active duty with the Coast Guard at that time. I'm a member of the Coast Guard Auxiliary. And the death resulted in my being summoned to a handsome beach house a few days later. As I walked to the house, I had no idea that I was even then inviting my own murder. Commander Steve Barnes of the Coast Guard was waiting for me at the beach house.
Mike, did you ever hear of Dr. James Calvin?
James Calvin? Oh?
He was quite a guy. He served with my dad during the war in Chemical Warfare Division. Afterwards, he became research director for one of our big chemical companies.
Oh, that does sound like quite a guy.
About a year ago, he retired and he built this house.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. 2 weeks ago, his body was found floating in the ocean about a half a mile from here. Oh. The autopsy indicated accidental drowning, but I just can't go along with it.
Why not?
Well, for one thing, he was a fine swimmer, an expert diver.
Happens to the best of us, you know.
He was wearing a wetsuit when they found him. No scuba equipment.
Well, could have been just skin diving.
Well, there's another thing. His daughter arrived yesterday just in time for the funeral. She's in the lab now going through her father's things. She told me something that tends to back up what I believe. I want you to listen to her and give me your opinion.
Okay.
And don't say anything about my suspicions. She's having a rough enough time the way it is.
I understand.
Patricia. Patricia? Mike Nelson is here. He's commander of the Coast Guard underwater flotilla and an expert scuba diver. Now, do you want to talk to him, or would you rather I explain things?
I'll be all right.
You sure? Tricia, this is Mike Nelson. Mike, Tricia Calvin. Tricia, I wish you'd read Mike that section of the letter that you read me yesterday.
Dad wrote me some time ago. He was working on a Project B. He was very mysterious about it, but last week he wrote me this letter. I have finally found what I've been looking for to perfect Project B. It only holds out for a few minutes, but then the first flight of an airplane only lasted 59 seconds. To keep away from prying eyes, I've fitted up an underwater lab that will be peak-proof, and I'll make my final test there. When you come to visit, I may have good news for you.
That's your cue, Mike. I want you to try and find that underwater lab.
Tell me, did you find anything in the lab here that might give us an idea, you know, a clue of some sort?
Just a lot of plans and drawings I don't understand.
May we see them?
Of course. He's apparently been working with various gases, both active and inert.
Well, you know about these things, huh?
I'm a chemist myself.
Oh, here's something I understand. A rebreather.
What's a rebreather?
Oh, you know what happens when you breathe from a tank underwater.
Well, I couldn't explain it technically.
You inhale compressed air, mostly nitrogen and oxygen. Your body uses up the oxygen and exhales nitrogen and carbon dioxide.
Oh, that's very good. Now, with a rebreather, something is used to absorb the carbon dioxide and to recirculate the nitrogen.
But you have to add oxygen.
Where's that come from?
A diver carries a tank of pure oxygen. Unless...
Unless what?
Unless a person could find a way to extract the oxygen from the water. Looks like that's what your father was working on. A few days later, with the aid of the drawings and the help of Patricia, who turned out to be a right smart gal, I managed to assemble a duplicate of Dr. Calvin's Project B. It looked good, and it looked practical. But there was one thing that puzzled us both. A circular opening threaded on the inside. Something besides the cap was supposed to screw in there. What? This was the only point in which the plans were vague. Meantime, I had hooked up a CO2 absorbent of the kind used before on rebreathers. The rest of the device resembled a regular rebreather, with one big exception. There was no oxygen bottle. There were 2 electrodes leading to batteries. They were obviously designed to produce oxygen from the surrounding water by electrolysis. It was more like a fish's gill than a rebreather. The problem was power. Electrolysis uses a lot. Well, I'm going to take this down the ocean.
I'll go with you.
All right, come along. Along with her other accomplishments, Patricia was a first-rate diver. That came in handy. She could observe what happened on the outside of the gill. I breathed from the gill. It worked better than I expected. I wasn't getting quite enough oxygen, but I was breathing all right. Then I got into trouble. The oxygen stopped flowing. I signaled for help. Patricia gave me air. We buddy breathed on the way up.
Well, it worked fine for a minute. It needs more power. And even if we do use more powerful batteries, we still won't be able to perfect it until we find out what the missing part's supposed to be.
How do we go about that?
I think it's about time that I start looking for that underwater lab that your dad mentioned in his letter.
Good idea.
So, while I'm down looking for the underwater lab, why don't you go home, huh, and take a look around the lab there. There's something missing from this device. We won't know much until we find it.
No.
Okay.
I hoped the underwater lab might give some clues to the missing part of the gill. There was only one hitch. First, I had to find the lab.
Hello, are you Patricia Calvin?
Yes.
I'm your neighbor from up on the hill. I'm Martha Loring.
Oh, Mrs. Loring. Oh, yes, Dad wrote me about you. Oh, please, come in. Please, come in and sit down, Mrs. Loring.
My dear, I can't begin to tell you how shocked I was when I heard about Dr. Calvin's death. We had become quite good friends.
Dad told me about you.
His sudden passing was a great tragedy.
A tragedy. And a mystery.
A mystery?
Oh, they tried to keep it from me for a while, but I finally found out that they think Dad's death wasn't an accident.
They?
Mr. Nelson and Commander Barnes of the Coast Guard. You see, Dad was working on a special device of some kind when he was drowned. And we're trying to find out exactly what it was.
Oh, my dear, that's a frightful thought.
Did Dad ever mention anything to you about a Project B?
No, he never mentioned his work.
Well, we think we have it pretty well figured out.
When you say we, do you mean Commander Barnes?
Oh, no, Mr. Nelson. He's here helping me.
I see. My dear, I think you're wonderful to be so brave and calm under such a tragedy. I'm sorry I can't stay longer, but let's get together soon for a real good chat.
Oh, I hope we can. I appreciate all you've done for Dad, and, well, I'd like to find some way to express it.
When I saw the cave entrance, I was sure that I had found Dr. Calvin's underwater laboratory. The flare showed me the inside of the cave. When I found the light, I knew that I was in the lab. This was quite a setup, 75 feet below the surface. No wonder Dr. Calvin had called it peak-proof. I saw nothing to verify Commander Barnes's theory about Dr. Calvin's death, and I had found nothing that might help me complete his underwater breathing device. Suddenly, I looked to the roof of the cave. There, wired to a hunk of buoyant plastic, was what I'd been looking for. As I examined it, I became more and more certain that this was the missing part of the gill.
Well?
It wasn't as slick a job as you think. And they suspect Calvin was murdered. And they know he was working on an important project before he died.
They know what it was. They've duplicated it. We watched them testing it earlier today.
Well, what do we do now?
Look! He must have found the cave. He has the container.
We saw check cave from top to bottom.
He found it and we didn't.
What next?
Sit tight, keep our eyes open. Still don't know what Calvin was using for a catalyst. If they figure that one out, we're going to need that net again.
One end of the problem was sealed up. The container I found in the cave fit the gill perfectly. But as far as I was concerned, the other end was wide open. What was the container for?
Mike, as I watched you in the water this morning, I noticed this was the escape hatch for the hydrogen, freed by electrolysis.
Yeah?
And it made bubbles as it escaped from the gill.
Yeah, the hydrogen has to pass through this container, and the container wouldn't be there if there wasn't something important supposed to be in it. Something different from a CO2 absorbent.
Mike, you know what a catalyst is. A chemical that causes other chemicals to react to each other. This must be intended to hold a catalyst. So that when you breathe out carbon dioxide and the gill gives off hydrogen, it converts it into a compound that's washed away in the water.
And there wouldn't be any bubbles.
No, no bubbles.
Oh, with something like this, a scuba diver would be able to remain underwater indefinitely and undetected.
That must be the essence of Dad's idea.
Well, now the big problem is what did he use for a catalyst?
Let's go on and search some more. Found in the jar marked sodium chloride.
Sodium chloride? Oh, that's the strangest looking table salt I've ever seen.
It's green and flaky.
Ah. What do you suppose it is?
Oh, I couldn't tell without analysis. But this could be Dad's catalyst.
Let's find out. Put some in a container and we'll test it in the tank, huh? I blew through the tube. The container with the green stuff in it was hooked up to a hydrogen bottle. And we were right. Not a bubble emerged, no matter how hard I blew. The chemical reaction evidently converted the hydrogen and carbon dioxide into a soluble organic salt, which dissolved in the water. This was, no question, Dr. Calvin's catalyst. I decided to take the gill to the underwater lab, where I could test it now in comfort and with facilities to make any necessary adjustments.
There's no mistake. He's got it now. It's over his shoulder. He's taking it into the water. Get the net. I'll be with you in a minute.
Right.
Watch the girl. Under no circumstance let her interfere, even if it means being seen.
I could understand now why somebody had wanted Dr. Calvin dead. From a military standpoint, the value of this device could be enormous. A whole army of swimmers could approach a coastline without a single bubble to reveal their presence. Too late, I realized what a mistake I'd made in not being more alert. Now I knew what had happened to Dr. Calvin. He had been trapped just as I was and held in the net till he drowned. It looked like I was in for the same fate, and for the same reason, to get hold of the gill.
It's a lovely afternoon. I thought I'd drop by for a chat.
Well, you'll have to excuse me, Mrs. Loring. I'm a little worried about Mr. Nelson. I want to get on my wetsuit and call the Coast Guard. Will you excuse me?
Put down the phone, Miss Calvin. I'm sorry, but if you try to use that phone, I'll shoot. Put it down.
I don't understand, Mrs. Loring. I was only thinking of Mike. He's been down there so long.
So far, they'd made no attempt to deprive me of what little air was left in my tank. I had some flares in my belt, but if I made a move for them, I knew what would happen. Time was running out. If I didn't make some move soon, I'd drown. If they caught Patricia before I could get free of the net, we'd both be finished. But I had swum alongside Patricia, and I knew that she'd take considerable catching.
I trapped down below.
Him! Holding you! All right, come on up out of there.
I gotta go back. Mike is down there, trapped in a net.
Is that all of them?
That's all of them.
Did you get Mrs. Loring?
The woman in the house?
Yes.
Yeah, we got her. Say, Patricia, who taught you how to tie a knot?
Fell I know, in the Coast Guard.
I thought so. Took two of us to get her untied.
I guess we know the truth now about Dad's death.
Yeah, I'm afraid so. The only consolation, I guess, is that he gave his life to save others. Maybe thousands of others. Hi, I'm Lloyd Bridges, inviting you to join us for another action-packed story of underwater adventure 1 week from today.